Hi, I'm Charis, and that was a really great preach, partly because I feel like mine's actually just going to build on that, but with a little difference. So my talk is called True Grit. It should be. Hopefully, there you go. And basically, I'm going to talk about why it's vital, if not even life-saving in my case, that we have this foundation built on the rock that is God, and how actually we have to actively work to stay on that firm foundation as well. So I'm going to tell a little bit of my story because it's the best example I have, and it's also something I've actually had to do myself. Just so you get the gist of it, I grew up in a Christian home, Christian parents. We came to church every Sunday. I knew God was there from a really young age, gave my life officially to God at 7, and then kind of reaffirmed over the years as well. But unfortunately, that didn't protect me from the world. Even the best upbringing doesn't necessarily do that. And so at the age of 6, something quite traumatic happened to me, basically, that I couldn't control and I had no choice in. And because I was a kid, I couldn't really explain what had happened. I didn't really understand. And I felt kind of ashamed and like maybe it was my fault, but I wasn't sure. So I didn't really get any support. I didn't talk about it. And basically what that meant was a load of lies crept in about, well, mainly kind of attacking who I was. Things like, oh, you're a black sheep. You're not lovable. And eventually that kind of became, oh, you've got to hide all of that and behave a certain way so that people will love and accept you. And so I kind of grew up with that mentality. And then over the years, school was rough for me. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. I got picked on, I got bullied, and I think I just kind of took that as confirmation of that. And then fast forwarding on until I was a teenager, that kind of evolved, like the lies evolved to, oh, maybe if I just looked a certain way, people would treat me different. And so actually what started out as something quite innocent, just wanting to get a little bit healthier and fitter, became this really slippery slope. And by the age of about 15, I think, I was then diagnosed with something quite serious called anorexia nervosa. I actually have a before photo, so if Colin's able to put that up, and I am the after. Be nice, because I am pregnant, so. But yeah, this is me, hopefully you can see. For those that don't know what anorexia is, it's actually a really serious mental health condition or illness. It essentially involves kind of a very distorted perception of what you look like, so body dysmorphia, you might be familiar with that term. It also involves a very disordered mindset towards food, to the point where someone who has this condition will starve themselves to death, quite literally. So it's really serious, and yeah, that was me. So anorexia affected me on every level, as you can imagine, physically, but also emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Not only was my body shutting down, but medical intervention was actually becoming quite a realistic possibility. But also mentally, I feel like anorexia kind of comes with its friends, depression and anxiety. And, you know, we weren't sure I'd get my GCSEs at the time. And actually, I was devolving quite badly to the point where I was believing a new lie, where actually the whole world would just be better if I wasn't in it. And on a daily basis was thinking about ways of actually ending my life. Now, at the time, I was actually reading my Bible quite consistently even. I had a really good plan. But prayer was quite hard. God felt really distant, mainly because of these lies. And I was convinced that he was disgusted and disappointed with me, and even started to feel quite ashamed to be in church. Like, I shouldn't be here. I don't even believe that God loves me enough, and that's not enough, and all of that rubbish. Basically, the enemy was winning, and my life was becoming smaller and smaller as a result. But I began to notice something really interesting at the time. It didn't matter how much people said they loved me, or they were proud of me, or affirmed me kind of verbally or whatever. It just didn't really stick. It would kind of just bounce off. It wouldn't last. And so that's where we kind of get to this concept of having true grit. I believe it comes in two parts. There are two sides to it. So we need to start by having a firm foundation based on the truth, and that's part one. And why is that? Well, in John 8, verse 44, and hopefully the verse will appear behind me. It actually talks about the enemy, it being in nature with his character to lie, that he is the father of lies. And this is why a firm foundation based on truth is so crucial, because it actually provides like a plumb line that we can then measure those lies against. Plumb lines, I think, not technical about this, but I think they're used to help make fences straight or something. So if you think about it that way, like it's a way of measuring what's true straight rather than like, oh, that's a bit wonky. And so, we've heard lots of preachers over the last few months about reading the Bible and having an actual relationship with God through prayer. And actually through those things, we have a better knowledge of who he is, a good father. And also we better know who we are, his kids that he loves. And so because of my upbringing and my Bible reading and even the vaguest of prayer lives at the time, I actually had enough understanding of this truth that I realized the change needed to come from me, as I said. And that meant sometimes I had to actually get a little tough on myself and start challenging some of those lies that I believed my whole life. The Bible talks about actually taking thoughts captive. That's actually a thing we have to do. It's not like a one and done thing. It's a constant thing for some of us. And it also in Ephesians 6, the armor of God, it's not just this Bible verse that they tell us regularly, like, oh yeah, put on the armor of God. Like, no, you've got to actually put it on regularly. It's not like a one and done thing. And actually, I think I've highlighted possibly verse 16, where it talks about the enemy arrows. In this day and age, we won't get stuck full of real arrows, realistically. But I actually think he wants to stick us full of lies, the enemy, a lot of the time. And if he can stick us through with so many of them that we then can't hear God, well, he's winning. And so that's why we need to actively fight against this. And putting on the armor of God is one way of doing that. So, and now we move on to the gritty side of true grit. Just very briefly, I remember reading about animals in captivity, I think circus animals specifically, and they'd kind of be shut in these cages for ages and ages and ages, and then once the cage doors opened, they actually wouldn't leave, and it's because they actually get fed in the cage, and they feel safe in the cage. It's become familiar, and the freedom then feels scary and unknown. And actually the healing or restoration of being rewilded is the scary and unknown thing, rather than being shut in a cage and kept captive. And I actually really think that we can be the same a lot of the time, mentally specifically. And just as an example from my own story, I remember Googling recovery statistics quite early on when I decided I really needed to, start doing something about this. Anorexia actually had, at the time anyway, this might have changed, the highest mortality rate out of all of the eating disorders. So it's quite serious. And then I think a large percentage of people recover to the point of managing their illness, but not fully recovering. And then a really small percentage of people will recover fully to go on and live full lives completely free. And I remember almost subconsciously telling God in that moment, that's going to be me in that small percentage. I'm going to be that person that's in that tiny group that's fully recovered. So this was quite a bold prayer at the time. A bit like those animals in that cage. I'd had this eating disorder for so long that actually it had become the familiar thing and the coping mechanism. And actually I couldn't remember what life was like before it, so how the heck was I going to imagine life without it at this point? But what I learned was having spiritual grit can mean holding on to a hope that sometimes seems nonsensical or impossible in the face of our circumstances. It's actually a side of our DNA, punching above our weight, that I really love and resonates with me. It talks about setting impossible goals, not limiting God or the Holy Spirit, having audacious faith, and being bold in the face of giants. And for me, that was my giant. That was the thing that was terrifying. It felt like free falling. And the truth is that freedom can seem really scary. And when you're used to being in pain or hurting, it can feel like we'll never know what it feels like not to have those things. And even, dare I say it, actually, sometimes we can get sympathy and a lot of attention for those things, and that can feel nice too. And actually, that can become the familiar thing, and actually, I don't want to lose that. It can become our identity in that way. I actually remember my mum challenging me on this. At one point, I'd said something like my eating disorder or something. And she was like, no, no, no. You be careful with your words. You don't claim it. You don't say it's yours. It's not yours. It's something you have, but it's not forever. And so I think we need to not have that mindset. It's not permanent. And so the other side of having spiritual grit means being tough on ourselves in this way too, and being on the watch in that way, and not letting our pain and our circumstances become who we are. It's believing more, actually, and that this can't be it. That was something for me when I was at rock bottom. It was like, this just can't be it. I'm so miserable. There's got to be something else. And also just recognizing that actually the enemy would love to keep our world really small. He'd love for us to be in cages and to not do anything, and to not be effective for the kingdom especially. But with God's help, we can obviously get past that and live in that freedom that feels scary at the time, but once you get used to it, it's not so bad. And I'm kind of living proof of that. I think I've been recovered maybe 10 years now, I'm not sure. As I sort of round up, I just want to acknowledge there are probably people here or that we know that have chronic mental health conditions or physical health conditions. I'm not here to dismiss that at all. I really believe therapy and medication can be a really great first step of actively taking back ground, actually, and that's part of the grit even, of actually accepting I need help. I personally had therapy myself, and it was great. It really unlocked things. So yeah, don't dismiss that at all. But yeah, just to summarize, having this true grit requires that we actively do something about it. We can't rely on other people to do it for us. We can't rely on other people's faith. It has to come from in here, or it's not sustainable. And it's also not a quick fix. I don't have an eating disorder anymore, but I still have to use true grit to fight the lies that got me there in the first place. And the new lies.
Come on, yeah. Yeah.
It does get easier, I promise. It gets easier with practice, and it's so worth it. And I just want to finish by reading a quote. It's by a guy called Matt Chandler. I don't know if you know him. But it goes, the more you identify with your struggle, the less you identify with Christ. And the more you identify with Christ, the more victory you'll have over your struggle. So I'd like to just encourage everyone to go away today and ask yourself, do you actually know the truth about yourself or God? Do you know a lot about God, but not actually know him? Because there's a difference. You can know a lot in here, but it not actually line up with what's in here. And it's really important that that happens. And then where could you actually be taking steps or having more grit toward the freedom that Jesus has already won for you on the cross?
Maybe.
And so, if you need help journeying this, please chat to one of us leaders or your group leaders if you're in a group. If you're not in a group, please get in a group. It's great. It's a great thing to do. Little shameless plug. But we'd love to work through this, and we'd love for you to not feel on your own as well, if that's you or if that's someone you know, bring them along. Thank you, everyone.